Hi there, women of welcome. How are you on this Monday morning? I'm trying to make sure that we're actually going live with you. So if you can see this, give me a wave. I'm not sure why. Here we go. Yeah, there we go. Give me a wave. Okay, good. We're having a little bit of trouble. Let's see here. Let's see if I can get some of our ladies on here. Lag in when we're trying to get ladies on. Hold on, I'm going to see if I can get Amy on here too. Once I see her on. Hi there, Christina.
Hi.
We are waiting for Amy to pop on here real quick. So if Amy clicks on the live, then we can invite her in here in just a second. So Amy, if you're watching this, let me see if I can. Oh, here we go. She already clicked. Ladies, I know there's always a lag and it's a little weird at the very beginning, but here, oh, look, here we got it together Monday morning.
Yay.
Jesus knew we needed to have the conversation.
Yes, I had to get a young one in here to help me.
Okay, good. Women of welcome, ladies. We're going to have a really important conversation this Monday morning, and it is about the skyrocketing data about pregnant women and postpartum women who are being detained by immigration enforcement right now. And we're a pro-life group of people. We are a pro-life group of women who care very, very much about what happens to preborn children and their mothers, regardless of their citizenship status, because we believe that every single person is made in the image and likeness of God. And so we want to talk today with two pro-life leaders, Christina, who is a pro-life advocate and speaker, and then Amy, who is also a pro-life advocate and speaker and the founder of Embraced Grace. These are two friends of mine and I trust them. And we want to have a good conversation today about why immigrants matter in this pro-life conversation, but also in this moment in this country where we are seeing more and more stories come to bear about the treatment of pregnant women and postpartum women, and even sometimes the separation of women with their nursing children in this season during heightened enforcement. So hi, Amy. Hi, Christina. Thank you for being with us.
Yay.
Thank you for
Thanks
having
for having
us.
us on.
I know. Ladies, you are all going to fall in love with these two. And I hope that you quickly follow Christina and Amy and Embrace Grace and Live Action and some of these other groups that they're affiliated with. So that'd be great to dig into them. But today, let's just talk about this. We're at a time in our nation's history and also just world history where dehumanization is so common. We've been talking about various groups of people. And since we are a pro-life woman group, we deeply care about the dignity and sanctity of every human life. So can you just share, like, as you guys are observing this, really just kind of from distinctly pro-life perches as well, like, what do you feel like needs to change or shift really in our thinking as Christian women and also pro-life women in and around this conversation that's happening in the conversation right now? Amy, I'm going to start with you and then go to Christina.
Well, I think with the pro-life issue and really just a lot of this pertains to a lot of different things. I think that we can catch ourselves getting to a place of looking at groups of people as maybe a statistic or just as something you read about, and you don't really humanize that person that it's about, or whatever that group of people are. Like, we just, even just corresponding with people on social media and the way that people talk to each other or comment on certain things. And I'm like, if you were face to face with that person, would you actually say that to them? Like, that is so horrible. And it's almost like this digital world where we dehumanize people, when all of these people have whatever issue we're talking about, they have real stories that they're walking through. They are, they there is value in every human life in whatever country that is, whether they are in the womb or they are senior citizens. Like, every life has value and every life is important. And so our organization, we're not really into politics say, but we are very much in wanting to engage the church to be the hands and feet of Jesus. We say yes, we are pro-life, but we are pro-love. That pro-life sometimes can be like a belief system, or I think not. I know the pro-life movement is very active and involved, but I think that people that think of pro-life, and even myself before I even got involved in the movement, I just thought it's like belief. It's your vote. What you know, it's just something that you believe in your heart. It's not necessarily a doing. And so it wasn't until I really got involved in the movement did I even know there was a movement. Number one, I went to church my whole life, never knew there was actually people doing things, but then seeing like where love is actually what changes people, and it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance, and it's his love that draws us to his side. It's love that is where true transformation happens. And I think both with the pro-life movement, but really, and with immigrants, with every issue in the world, love is really what changes people. And so that is my heart, is that was to go beyond looking at a group of people as just a statistic or a number, or you know, just looking at what you see on the news, but actually understanding that every person that represents is a person that has a story and that has value.
And I love that, you know, Amy and at Embrace Grace, they always say, you know, we are a pro love movement. And I really, and I deeply appreciate that. And I've seen Amy and Embrace Grace live that out as well. But I also love your phrasing that you say, love saves lives. And that is very true. And Christina, tell me what you think needs to kind of shift as we think about this in this cultural moment, which is just really heated and divisive.
Right.
And all of us are like unifiers, and we want to base what we believe and how we act and talk about people in our biblical values, but also our pro life values. What do you think needs to shift in people's hearts and minds right now?
Well, I think it's important for us as pro-lifers and just as human beings to be able to listen to one another. So this is something that I've consistently said for a long time. You can have a different set of beliefs than, you know, a people group or a political party or a movement. This is, you know, when the Black Lives Matter movement was at its height and there was so much tension and division and, you know, differences of opinions. One of the things I said during that time was, you know, you don't have to agree with this movement or even the activism, but you can listen to what people are saying, because when you listen, you hear them saying, I'm on the streets, or I'm fighting, or I'm marching because I care about my children. I care about my teenagers. I care about my husband. I care about police brutality. I care about those things. And I find that when you listen, and you kind of hold back your judgment, it allows you to build a bridge and to better understand people. So one of the things that Margaret Sanger did, who was the founder of Planned Parenthood, before that was called the American, I think it was birth control. She had a birth control name attached to it, but she was really good at manipulating people by just putting out words and language in her writings towards people of color that was really, you know, dehumanizing. So she might call them weeds, or she might say that they were feeble-minded. And so therefore, in time, when people were promoting, at the time it was birth control, but then later abortion, obviously other things like forced sterilization, more people were comfortable doing that because they saw Black people as less than human. So when the Negro Project happened, people were more willing to go along with that, even people of color, because they understood that in the back of their mind, they'd been fed these lies about who these people were. And I see that happening a lot with the immigration issue. So you can be a conservative. I'm a conservative. You can vote Republican. I've voted Republican for, for many, many years. I'm unaffiliated now, but for the past probably, I don't know, 10, 15 years, voted Republican. You can, you know, support strong borders and everything else. Still, while always keeping in mind the human dignity of people, listening to their sorrows, listening to their pain, understanding what's going on in their communities, not writing them off, not being so tribal that you're looking at this just like a culture war and not thinking that your side completely has it right. You know, I know for me, I don't believe that. I've really never believed that. And so finding, common ground and just seeing people as human beings that are vulnerable. Many of them are scared. And some of the things that I've seen that have been really disheartening to me is just just really like snarky, sarcastic humor, making fun of people. There's been times where immigrants have been detained or deported, and maybe there's images of them, and I see people taking the images and mocking the way that they look and making fun of them. And I just don't see how that is helpful. I don't see how that is necessary. And I think that that just hardens our heart when we act like that. And it helps us to just, reinforce the strong division that we already have in this country. So I would just say again, to try to see people as human beings worthy of dignity and, have your beliefs, whatever those beliefs are, but make sure that you're listening to people and make sure that you're seeing both sides of things.
Yeah. And I mean, in the pro life movement, we know that language really defines and showcases what is true about a person. And so, like in the abortion space, we don't call a preborn child a fetus. We call that a human life. We call that a child, a human being. And we do this because it's truthful, because it's humanizing and it's dignifying. And we want this ethic, this life affirming ethic, this humanizing ethic to be carried to all areas of humanity, including immigrants and refugees, because we also know that they are made in the image and likeness of God. And so, I mean, some of the most troubling things that I continue to hear people say, and some of it can be out of ignorance, and that is true. And so you want to remain charitable in these conversations, right? But being charitable doesn't mean you are soft on truth. Being convictional doesn't mean you're being soft on truth. And so, some of the most disturbing terminology I continue to hear is to call people aliens or to call people illegal in some way. So, an action that someone may or may not have committed could be illegal and it should be labeled as such, and that's true. Like, you crossed a border illegally, but it is not the most humanizing and life affirming thing to call someone an illegal alien. That really does other them in a way that is unnecessary. And as Christians, we are told that we hold life and death in our tongues, and so that we are to be edifying of other people and to always think of others as better than ourselves. I mean, Amy, what are some of kind of the either stories or phrases or things that you've seen from people that just really are disheartening to you in terms of how people are talking about maybe immigrants and refugees right now?
Well, for sure. I think I hear the most is illegal or alien for sure. I think it's identifying a person based on something they may or may not have done. Like, if you lied, say you lied about something last year, like, and what if you just walked around and like literally everyone referred to you as a liar? Like, you
All
lied
the
one
time.
time and yeah, and that's just what they refer to you as. Like, it could really beat you down, but what's interesting to me about the term alien is it actually is in the Bible. That, Jeremiah 22:3 says, do no wrong or violence to the resident alien, the fatherless, or the widow, which is the ESV version. And so, times change in that term. When you think of alien, you think of, like, if someone said the word alien to you right now, the first thought you would have in your head is an outer space,
Like
non-human
non-human life
Right.
form.
entity. Yes. And the NIV version has a different, it says, do no wrong or violence to the foreigner, the fatherless, or the widow. And, I think there's other alternatives we can use, like non-citizen or undocumented immigrant, things like that, that doesn't make a person feel less than because of what they may or may not have done.
Yeah. Yeah. Christina, what do you say about that?
Yeah, I think it's especially hard when the words are all strung together. Like every time they say immigrant, they're saying illegal, criminal, alien, and they're
Yeah.
they're putting it all together like that. And I'm not an immigration lawyer, of course. Like, this is not my area of expertise. My area of expertise is the pro-life movement. But I think everything is interconnected when it comes to people. But I do know that not every person who is here is a criminal. I have heard that before, and maybe Bree, you can understand that a little bit more. Like, some are seeking asylum, some may be coming because they're persecuted. Some are perhaps in the process of becoming a citizen. And so I know that there's a difference in the law, that like legally not every single person is considered to be a criminal, but yet that's the language that we hear, that every single person, no matter their immigration status, is a criminal. If you're over here, and you're not supposed to be, therefore you're a criminal. But again, when we think of that word criminal, what does that bring to mind? It brings to mind someone who, in a lot of cases, might be a dangerous person, could be, a monster, could be someone who could do us harm. And so therefore, I think when we use that language for every single person, regardless of, their legal status and the differences between the law, when we use that language across the board, I think that causes for people to have a lot of fear. And I think that a lot of the conversation that we have is rooted in fear. I think that people are afraid often of those that are different than them, and those that they may not understand their stories and their plights. And then especially when you hear things like, whenever it's like a these people thing, you have to really question, who are you talking about? These people are coming over here. These people are stealing our jobs. These people are making it harder for us. Once these people get out of the country, then we'll have it easier. And when you hear language like that, grouping everyone together, these people, criminals, and people will say things. You'll hear a really sad story about, a mother or a woman separated from their child, and somebody will say in the comments, this is exactly what I voted for. And it's just that callousness that people can joke and say things like that in kind of a harsh way, and not recognizing that their neighbors are watching and looking at them, and reading those comments. And it's harmful because, again, like Amy said, if you were there, so I'm a foster to adopt mother. So my son is adopted from the foster care system, and then we adopted him. And so, just for an example, it's not the same thing, but you can support children being removed from their families. Like if the mother, the biological mother or parent is an addict or has an addiction, or there's sexual abuse, like absolutely you do support that. But if you were there watching that happen and the child screaming, even though the mother needs to be separated from their child because that mother is a danger to her child, but if you're watching it happen, if you're a social worker or you're just happening to peer in, and the child doesn't understand and they're screaming like what is happening, you can still support the act of that happening, but you would never make a joke about it because the child's terrified, the mother has an addiction, the mother has an issue. Again, it doesn't completely correlate, it's not the same situation, but I'm just saying that even in situations where you can say I support this deportation, it's still a painful circumstance. It's still scary. A mother may be separated from their child, a husband from a wife, a teenager from their family. And so there's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of pain. There's tears. I saw a video of a woman who was delivering DoorDash, and she runs into the house of a woman, and she was just so terrified. And I was watching that just sobbing. No, it's hard to see. So why would we then just be so callous with our words and joking and laughing about that, when really we should be, even if you, again, support those things, still mourning with the fact that someone is in a position of pain and they're dealing with suffering in a way, whether it's at their hands or not. Because the reality is we all, in some ways, I have severe ADHD. So the amount of times that I have missed something, forgotten to do something, gotten, the other day pulled over, it was months ago, the cop was like, license and registration. It was like, oops, my registration was like completely expired, and there are times where I've had lots of times with my ADHD where it's like I could have gotten like the extent of the law, and instead I got mercy and grace. But not to say that you should ever do that.
Yeah.
And I'm working on it, but you know what I mean. So
Yeah.
like we all have made mistakes and done things where if we had the full extent of the law given towards us, then we would feel the weight of that. But for some of us, we have not. We've had grace in different ways. So I just think that the Bible talks about, being merciful to one another. And I think the more merciful you are, doesn't mean that you excuse things. It doesn't mean that you don't believe in laws, or it doesn't mean that we're saying, abolish ICE, but the more merciful you are, the more mercy comes back to you, is what I believe.
Yeah. And I mean, for those who are going to watch this and maybe Women of Welcome will be new to you, we are a group of Christian women who believe in pro-life for the whole life. And we also believe in safe and secure borders and thorough vetting and law and order. But we also believe very much so deeply in the humane treatment of people who are made in the image and likeness of God, which is why we want to have this conversation today with other staunchly pro-life women who believe the same thing. And so I love what you were saying there, Christina, and just about how you were paying it, even just paying attention and hearing stories. And there are so many stories that are coming up. It's hard to discern really kind of through all the information, the full context of every story. And it's not like everybody can look at every story and be like, that was justified, that was not, or whatnot. What we want is we want enforcement of the laws, including immigration laws, but we want humane treatment of people. We don't want an abuse of power. And today, what we really want to focus on is that we have seen from ICE's own data that there is a skyrocketing number of women who are pregnant or postpartum who are being detained. And that is something that goes against decades of ICE policy and advisement, and we'd love to see that be reinstated. One of the questions I want to ask you before we get into what people can do is, what are some of the biggest concerns that you have knowing that more like pregnant immigrant women and their babies are being detained or being separated? I mean, we've even seen legitimate reporting about women who've just delivered and then immigration enforcement is right there outside the delivery room, and not even 6 hours later they're detained and baby is in the nursery. You know, some of these stories, not every story out there is providing the full context, but we have dozens and dozens of stories that are true, have full context, and that are very concerning. Amy, I'm going to start with you. When you hear these stories about specifically about pregnant women or postpartum women being in detainment, and we know that we have other alternatives to enforcing the law with those ladies, what do you think about that? What is most concerning to you?
Well, I really, again, it's like I think so many people put people in buckets and things, but pregnancy, it's not a political issue. It's just a human issue,
It's a
having a
healthcare
baby, and
issue.
it's a healthcare issue, and pregnant women require specialized care. At the same time, I believe nations have a responsibility to uphold laws and to maintain order, and that's not necessarily the tension. It's just the tension is how we uphold the law while protecting life and dignity,
Right.
and especially for women carrying children. So I wish that we had other alternatives or strong partnerships between the detention facilities and healthcare systems, or even just alternatives to detention for pregnant and postpartum women whenever possible, which I think Christine is going to be talking a little about
Yeah.
for ideas. And I wish that also that the church was positioned and ready to step in, not just with opinions, but with practical support in how that's done. And I think as a believer, and like a big question that we have to ask ourselves is, as the church and the pro-life movement, are we protecting the most vulnerable life in every setting? And are we treating the mother as someone worthy of care and not just like a number or a case file? And, as pro-life leaders, consistency matters. And if we advocate for babies in the womb, we have to advocate for those, the well-being and the mother's safety wherever. So that doesn't mean we have every policy answer, but I do believe it's something we need to dig into and look through different alternatives to help with the situation.
Yeah, I mean, I love what you just highlighted there, because it's not about not having enforcement that's needed and happening. It's about having an extra level of care and concern for how we are implementing these laws. And we do have in the immigration space, if you have alternatives to detention, especially for those who have either low level risk or are those who have simply, they've been in the country for a while, and their only violation was an immigration violation of crossing the border, and they have no other record here, or they're not a flight risk, or that they're waiting for their case to be adjudicated. So many are asylum seekers who seeking asylum is legal in between and at ports of entry, and that's just written into law. And so if their case is being adjudicated according to law, then they should be okay, right? And so we do have these alternatives. There's ankle monitors, there's parolee managers, there are other alternatives that we can actually give to pregnant and postpartum women so that they could actually continue the health care. Law enforcement isn't health care, and we know that these women are extremely vulnerable, and so are their kids. So, Christina, do you have anything you want to add to that about your concerns about these women who are being detained?
Yeah, just, along with what you guys said, if you listen to stories from people who are, detained that are not pregnant, that are just,
Right.
grown men, they are saying it's hard for them. There's an Irish man who is making national news, and he's currently detained, and he's saying, I'm not getting enough food, and it's very difficult for me to survive, and please help me get out of here. And so if you think about these grown men who are saying it's hard for me to get enough food, it's hard for me to get enough sleep, it's hard for me to get proper hygiene, what about a pregnant woman and her child? And so oftentimes when it comes to the pro-life movement, we say certain things, like let's say in the case of a woman who was a victim of rape, and she is considering whether or not she wants to have an abortion or to keep her child. The pro-lifers will say things like, that baby is innocent and they shouldn't pay for the crimes of their father. We'll say things like that. And so I think we need to also remember that when it comes to this situation, that babies in the womb, they just are existing inside of their, mother's womb, and they're just growing, and they don't know anything about politics or immigration or how their parents got here. They're just existing. There's two people there, it's not just one. We believe that there's two people there, and they're suffering, in these situations. And, yes, you can say, okay, because of the parents. And sometimes people will very callously say, well, that's their mother or, father's fault. And I've heard people say that. But again, speaking with empathy, speaking with compassion and kindness, and caring for two people, how can we best serve them? And if we know that these women are in a vulnerable state and they're in detention centers and they're not getting what they need for their pregnancy to, thrive and be sustained, then what else can we do? Like you talked about alternatives. What can we do instead of them, being detained? And because we're talking about a short period of time,
Right.
we're just talking about this short window where we're not talking about forever. It's just a short window where we want to make sure that women are safe so that they can have a child for, when it comes to, again, the pro-life movement. Sometimes I've told people who are, considering abortion, I've said, you carry a baby for, this many months, it's like 9 months, and then you might have a child that's alive for 90 years. And so when you think about that, the human being that could, be alive and thrive and have an entire life and a legacy, we're just saying during this, period of time to make sure they're getting the care that they need.
Right. And it is a very vulnerable time. And we know that, I mean, for those of us who are adoptive moms, we know that just from trauma-informed care and trauma-informed learning, we know that those first years of life, 0 to 3, are incredibly impactful for the rest of that person's trajectory in life.
Yes.
And we know probably in the immigrant population that their ability to get healthcare and specialized services to meet trauma needs from these experiences that are happening, it's going to be pretty low to non-existent for them to be able to have access and find this kind of specialized healthcare to overcome traumatic experiences. And so we know that these women and their preborn babies and their babies that were just born in nursing are extremely vulnerable. And so this is why we keep saying safe and secure borders, thorough vetting, law and order, but also the humane treatment of
Right.
human beings. And so this isn't about being soft on law and order. This is about being soft to the needs of humanity, because we believe that each and every person is made in the image and likeness of God. And we also believe that this country can and should be better, that we can have these nuances and that we can value life in this way. One of the last things, as we talk about this, people are like, we'll probably start Googling stories, and you should see the stories that are happening. We know that there have been stillborn births and miscarriages and women who have not gotten the health care that they need and have not been taken care of well. And therefore, that's going to have lifelong lasting effects on their babies. And so people are going to be wondering, well, what can I do? What can I do? And the last thing that we want to talk about is there is something that you can do. And Christina, you and I are going to talk about this more in depth, but there's a number of pro-life organizations and leaders, over 30 of them, who have signed on to a letter that's calling on the current administration to reinstate and adhere to federal protections preventing the detention of pregnant and postpartum and nursing women in ICE custody. And we think that's incredibly important. Like you just mentioned, it even just can be for a short period of time, but
Right.
there should be exceptions made for the most vulnerable among us, for sure. And so this
Hey,
is a letter
Bree.
that you can, oh, huh? Go
Bree,
ahead.
I wanted to say one thing really quick too, like, because I feel
Yeah.
like we haven't talked about this part too, but like one of our Embrace Grace leaders was saying she's in north or southern Idaho, and she said, or maybe northern Idaho, she said that they were getting a lot of uh immigrants from Guatemala, and I have it written down somewhere on here. But they were 14 to 15-year-olds who had been trafficked. And so, they were preyed upon as in a vulnerable, just like in America where there's trafficking, you hear the stories of how it starts, and they were preyed upon, and um they were in vulnerable situations. They were sold the dream of what America can do, and then these men took them over the border but raped them along the way, and they got pregnant just coming into it. And so if you can only imagine, like, number one, being a child yourself, and
Mm-hmm.
number two, then going, getting apprehended and being put into an ICE detention after going through the trauma of rape, kidnapping, all of those things, and then going into a place where there's no care for you, even emotionally, for the mental things that are going on, but then also for you and your baby when you're a child yourself and you're pregnant. And this Embrace Grace leader just said that it was like had an influx of them in their area, and that they were just so brokenhearted trying to know what can they do, in this. But I just wanted to bring up, because I feel like it's like bringing up that these are very complex stories of the situations that are going on. And so anyways, you can go on about the letter, but I just wanted to bring that up. It's like all of these, we had another mom too, that went through Embrace Grace, and we had taken these beautiful photo shoot of her. I mean, so a mom and daughter, and it was so beautiful. And we asked if we could use her picture for social media. And she said that she couldn't because her dad was killed by the cartel, and her cousin was killed by the cartel, and she was threatened. So she didn't want any of her pictures out online because she was fearing for her life. And I love that the church still cared for her and loved for her and didn't turn away and say, well, then we can't because you are here illegally, but they still were with her. So anyways, that's all. Just wanted to add a little bit more humanity to this,
Yeah.
even more so.
I mean, all of this perception about immigrants and refugees right now, all this perception can be dramatically changed by the power of proximity. And we talk about this a lot at Women of Welcome, but I also know that both of your organizations that you're both affiliated with are big on getting close to the issue and big on getting close to people who are experiencing the trauma and the pain of abortion, but also just those who have chosen life and chosen to parent. And then they're wondering who's going to walk alongside them. And this is a huge opportunity for the church to be the church. And like you say all the time, Amy, love saves lives. And that this is really, this really should be a pro love movement amongst the church, especially among people who say that they are pro-life. And so we don't want our entire lives and our entire attitude towards people to be summed up in one action that someone may or may not have participated in, right? Like, this is just a huge story. There's so many women are
So
among the
many.
most vulnerable in this conversation, And so I love that you share that. And I also love that you share that your leadership in your local chapter groups is getting close to immigrant mothers who actually probably feel the most vulnerable and probably the least seen. And you probably don't want to be seen either. You want to kind of hide into the shadows, but you need help. You need help. So
Yeah.
one of the ways you can do that is through your, oh, do you want to say something else, Amy?
Yeah,
I
because
just
it came to
need
my,
to
oh, go ahead.
I jump off, and I'm going to let you guys go. I have a doctor's appointment, so I got to jump off, but I love you guys, and I'm so thankful for all the
Love you,
work
Amy.
that you guys do. I'm going to tune in and listen as you guys finish. Bye.
All right. Love you, girl. So one of the things that we can do that Christina is going to talk about is that there is over 30 pro-life organizations that have joined together with, I believe the organization is Rehumanize International.
Rehumanize, yes.
Yep. And they pulled together a coalition of pro-life groups, and I thought this was great and this is brilliant and it's so needed to say to the current administration, we want you to adhere to really kind of the federal protections that prevent the detention of pregnant and postpartum and nursing women in immigrant detention, because it's not a healthcare space. It's not
Right.
designed to provide the specialized needs that women have when they're in this season, in this phase of life, and when their children are in this phase of life. And so, Christine, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the letter, and then we're going to tell you where you can find it, sign on to it, and share about the letter as well.
Sure. So right before I do that, I just want to not lose the thought that I had when Amy was speaking, because I think what happens when it comes to, hearing these stories, like Amy was sharing some really devastating stories about, young girls being sex trafficked. And when you hear a story like that, your heart is just automatically drawn to compassion and love. And you want those people, the women that are suffering in that way, to be treated with, dignity and care. But I think that at the same time, all of us are active on social media. All of us are engaged in these, political discussions. And what happens is your compassion is kind of, ignited, and your love is ignited. And you think, I want to show love. I want these people to be treated well. But then at the same time, you might hear another person on your Facebook or your Instagram account say, well, what about this person who was killed by an immigrant? You say you love this young girl who is sex trafficked, but, do you love, Lincoln Riley? Do you love
Yes,
these
the
other
answer is
women who
yes.
were, and again, the answer is yes. And so one of the tactics of, the pro-choice movement is to pit, mother against child, and say that you have to decide who you're going to, show love for. And if you say that you love the mother, then she should be able to, end the life of her child in the womb. But a very common slogan in the pro-life movement is love them both, which is the idea and concept that, it is actually possible to love the baby in the womb and to love the mother as well. And so I just wanted to put that out there, because I think I hear that all the time, and we didn't, touch on it yet, but people will just often say that. It's like, no, you can love the women who have unfortunately been the victim of crimes. And of course, it's important to say that in all of those cases, there's justice that's brought, and it's brought pretty quickly. And so therefore, people will say, well, how come there's not protests, or how come there's not rallies? And it's because very often there's quickly a conviction, and the person goes to jail, and they're sentenced, and maybe there's legislation that happens, like in Lincoln's case. And so, justice is brought forth. And you can also love these, vulnerable women and children, and men too. But back to the letter. So the letter was signed by, 30 different, pro-life organizations. It was through Rehumanize International. They're more of a progressive pro-life organization. They really care about the dignity of human beings. And I just want to read a small part of the letter. It says, we write as pro-life organizations to urge the immediate reinstatement and enforcement of federal protections that prevent the detention of pregnant, postpartum, and nursing women, except in truly exceptional circumstances. Pregnancy and early postpartum are medical states that require care that immigration detention facilities are structurally unable to provide. So if anyone's interested in seeing that, they can go to Rehumanize, Rehumanize, INTL, which is short for international.org, post protect immigrant mothers. And one of the things that I wasn't aware of, before talking to Lauren, who leads Rehumanize, is that there's already a policy in place from 2021 that's already in place, and it's on ICE's website, but it's been archived, that's saying that ICE should not arrest or detain individuals known to be pregnant, postpartum, or nursing. So we're not saying, hey, let's make up something new. We're not talking about some revolutionary thing that's never happened before. We're not, bringing forth this brand new idea. We're actually just saying, hey, this policy since 2021 is already, enforced, and we're just asking for them to continue to abide by it. That's what we're asking.
Right. We're asking for that. And if you want more information on the letter, if you want to sign on to the letter, if you want to share the letter, just comment pro-life in the comments here, and you're going to get a direct DM to the link to sign on to that letter. And we'll get that posted on our Women of Welcome website and our advocacy page here later this week as well. But this is what we're asking for. We're asking for an assurance and a reinstatement that we would be using alternatives to detention for these most vulnerable women. And we would ask you to sign on to this letter and share this letter as well, because it's incredibly important. Like we just said, it's not like we're asking for something brand new, out pie in the sky. I mean, there's plenty of things that I could think about that I would want to ask this current administration to do in terms of enforcement. But this is a very specific pro-life ask about immigrant women who are, in fact, according to ICE's own data, being detained at higher rates along with children than ever before. And this is incredibly important to pay attention to. So we are two pro-life women who are asking you to advocate for pro-life legislation, but also just adherence to policy that has already been proposed and has been on the books for a while. And it is incredibly concerning that we still see more and more women being detained and their children, as well as these stories of women not getting the health care that they need and miscarrying in detention facilities. It's incredibly harrowing and disturbing. And so we wanted to bring this to your attention, and we wanted to say that you could be a part of it. And so just comment pro-life in the comments, and we'll get that letter to you for you to sign and to share it to other people. Anything else you'd like to say, Christina, today, this morning?
Yeah, so I just wanted to give two resources that Lauren, who leads Rehumanize, gave to me, and I want to pass them on. So
Sure.
one is a document called The Abuse of Pregnant Women and Children in U.S. Immigration Detention. It's from a Georgia senator, and you can go online and you can look up this document, because I know I've been sharing in my Instagram stories various stories of, immigrants who have been detained, and there's been mistreatment. And some people get really mad at me when I share those stories.
Right.
I probably lost like maybe 2,000 followers. I don't really always check, but I can see when the main number goes down. So I estimate maybe 2,000 people maybe unfollowed me, probably because of that, which is fine, to each their own. But people will often say that's not true, and then they'll share another news story that's refuting what I shared. And so this is
It was
a
put out last
report.
summer. This report was put out
Yeah,
last summer, right? It's thorough.
this is a pretty thorough report, and it says that there are at least 14 credible reports. I'm sure there's more, but this report
It was
contains at
last
least
summer.
14 credible reports from last summer for pregnant women that have been mistreated in DHS custody. And some of the things that they've reported are women sleeping on the floor, being left alone in a room to miscarry without water, without medical assistance, being overcrowded and not seeing their doctors. And so if you're concerned about, because again, people are very tribal and we're very divided, and so we're aware of that. So if you share a news article from a particular news source, someone's going to say, I don't trust that news. Someone doesn't trust Fox and someone doesn't trust CNN, right? Personally, I like to read all the different news, but
Yeah.
I get that reality. And so and someone might not trust this report because it's not a
Republican
conservative
senator. I think
senator,
it's,
Republican
yeah.
senator. But still, nevertheless, I think if we can listen to those, even if we disagree with them, that's important. And then the last thing is there is a document online called ICE's Alternatives to Detention, or ATD program. And just people can click and look at that. You can Google it, ICE's Alternatives to Detention. And they mention some of the things that we've talked about throughout this time. Electronic monitoring, GPS, telephonic reporting, like voice ID, case management, in-person or virtual case management services, home visits, office visits, and that this is being used. This has been used. Again, this is not a new thing.
Right.
People have been monitored in this way, and they found success in doing that. And so, again, we're really not talking about anything radical. And not anything.
We're not
extreme.
talking about a lack of enforcement. We're
Right.
talking about an alternative to detention for pregnant and postpartum women and or their children, so that we are not housing them in places where they cannot get adequate health care for them or their preborn children. So I think
Very simple.
It's very simple, and it's not, like you said, it's not out of line with what is currently happening for some situations and circumstances or immigrants around the country. So do yourself a favor and comment pro-life in the comment box, and we will directly send you the link to the letter to sign on to that and to share. And of course, in all of this, we do ask that you would just be praying. Would we ask that you'd be praying to soften the hearts and minds of those who are creating policies and doing enforcement? So that includes our president, that includes Tom Holman, that includes anybody who's got their hands on the immigration enforcement, and which is so necessary in this country. Immigration enforcement is necessary, but we also need to have the humane treatment of people, especially some of the most vulnerable in this situation, which are pregnant women and children. So Christina, thank you. And thanks to Amy for popping on too as well. So pro-life, that's the comment you need in the bottom, and we'll get you this article and this letter for you to sign, send, and share. So thanks so much, Christina.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me. Thanks everybody for listening.
Bye-bye.